Have you ever stopped to think about how some artists manage to touch people's hearts with their songs? Kenny Rogers was one of those rare talents. But before he became a country legend, he was just a kid from Texas with a big dream and a huge passion for music. Have you ever heard The Gambler, Islands in the Stream, or Lady? These are just some of the iconic songs that made Kenny Rogers one of the greatest names in country music of all time. In this video, we'll delve into the incredible journey of this star, from his humble childhood in Texas to becoming a worldwide legend. Kenny was born on August 21, 1938, in the city of Houston, Texas. His family was not wealthy and he grew up amidst challenges, being one of 8 siblings. His father, Edward Floyd Rogers, worked as a carpenter and his mother, Lucille, was a nurse. Like any child, Kenny played in the streets, had fun with his siblings and helped out around the house as much as he could. But there was already something different inside him. From a very young age, he realized that music had a special effect on him. His first contact with this universe came through the radio. He listened to blues, jazz, gospel, and, of course, country. Those sounds coming out of the speakers seemed to tell stories in a unique way, and Kenny was enchanted by each chord. He wanted to understand how those songs were made, and more than that, he wanted to one day be a part of that world. The first time Kenny saw an artist perform live was a magical moment. He knew at that moment that he wanted to spend the rest of his life singing. But how could a poor kid from Texas make that dream come true? That was a question he still couldn't answer. Even without the money to buy a sophisticated instrument, he found ways to explore his passion. He got a simple guitar and started practicing. Whenever he could, he tried to learn something new, watching more experienced musicians and absorbing everything around him. He had no idea that this boy, who practiced chords with sore fingers, would become one of the biggest names in country music. Over time, Kenny began to shape his musical identity. He realized that he liked different styles and wanted to try everything. This desire to learn would help him a lot in the future. But at that time, he was still just a young dreamer, living in a simple house in Texas, without imagining that his voice would one day travel the world. Life still had many challenges ahead, but one thing was certain: Kenny Rogers was destined to shine. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any updates. Like and share with your friends. Take the opportunity to leave a comment below and tell me what you thought. When you have a big dream, the beginning can be difficult. And for Kenny Rogers, it was no different. He knew he wanted to make a living from music, but it wasn't enough to just want it. He had to work hard. In high school, Kenny began taking the first steps to turn his passion into a career. He joined a band called the Scholars, a local group that played at small parties and events. It was the first time he had performed in front of a real audience. Feeling the energy of people listening to his voice was something that left a lasting impression on him. But he knew he needed to go further. After finishing his studies, Kenny began exploring new opportunities. His big break came when he joined the Bobby Doyle Trio, a jazz group in which he played bass and also sang. It was an important time. Jazz was a sophisticated style, full of technique, and this experience helped Kenny hone his musicality. He learned about harmony, rhythm, and most importantly, how to connect with an audience. Even though country music was still close to his heart, this period in jazz was essential in shaping his talent. Kenny also began to stand out as a vocalist. He had a unique voice, husky, captivating, full of emotion. It drew attention wherever he went. He knew he had something special, but he hadn't yet found his definitive path. Behind the scenes of music, he began to understand how the industry worked. He learned about contracts, recordings, and the importance of being in the right place at the right time. Little by little, his path began to take shape. The journey was still long, but Kenny was willing to go all the way. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to take a step that would change everything. Do you know that moment in life when everything starts to make sense? For Kenny Rogers, that moment came in the 1960s, when he found his first big opportunity in the music world. After his experience with the Bobby Doyle Trio, Kenny wanted something new, something bigger. It was then that, in 1967, he joined a group called the First Edition. This was a turning point. The band had a different sound, a bold mix of psychedelic rock, folk, and country. They were experimenting with a style that reflected the 60s, a time of musical change and revolution. At first, the group was not very well known. But everything changed when they released Just Dropped In, To See What Condition My Condition Was In. This song was different from anything Kenny had done before. It had a psychedelic feel, full of sound effects, very much in the style of what was popular at the time. And it was a hit. Suddenly, the first edition was at the top of the charts, appearing on TV shows and touring the United States. The band started to gain recognition and Kenny, with his distinctive voice, began to stand out. But success did not come without challenges. The group had to reinvent itself to remain relevant. Over time, they left psychedelic rock aside and moved closer to country and folk. This change was crucial because it paved the way for what would come later. Kenny realized that country music was in his DNA. He liked to tell stories through songs, and country was the perfect style for that. It was then, in the 70s, that he made the most important decision of his career: to go solo. He knew that it wouldn't be easy to leave a band that was already successful. But Kenny was ready to take the risk. What he didn't imagine was that this decision would turn him into one of the greatest artists in the history of country music. What happened next? Now is the time when Kenny begins to walk the path that would make him a legend. Shall we continue? There is a moment in life when everything changes for Kenny Rogers. That moment was when he decided to go solo. He had already tasted success with the first edition, but something inside him told him it was time for a new beginning. In the 70s, country music was evolving. Audiences were beginning to fall in love with artists who blended traditional country with a touch of pop, creating a sound that was accessible to radio and large audiences. Kenny realized that this was the right path. He had the perfect voice for it, strong, husky, and full of emotion. In 1976, he released his first major solo hit, Lucille. The song told the story of a man who is left by his wife and feels lost. It was a simple narrative but full of feeling. Audiences immediately identified with it. Lucille exploded onto the charts, became an international hit, and earned Kenny Rogers his first Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. And that was how he officially became a country star. After Lucille, the hits didn't stop. Kenny released a series of songs that won over millions of fans. He knew exactly how to tell stories through his songs. Each song was like a little movie, full of emotion, drama, and unforgettable characters. In addition to his unique voice, Kenny also had an incredible stage presence. He wasn't just a singer, he was a true storyteller. When he took the stage, people felt like they were listening to someone who understood their feelings, their pain, and their dreams. In the years that followed, Kenny Rogers established himself as one of the biggest names in country music. His style wasn't just for traditional country fans. He appealed to people of all musical tastes. But the biggest hit of his career was yet to come. If there's one song that defines Kenny Rogers' career, it's The Gambler. Released in 1978, it wasn't just a hit, it became a legend in its own right. The song tells the story of a seasoned gambler who sits next to a younger man on a train and gives him some valuable life advice. He says that knowing when to hold your cards and when to fold them isn't just about gambling, it's about how to handle life's choices. You gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. The lyrics were a powerful metaphor, and the way Kenny sang them made each word sound like a lesson. He wasn't just performing a song. He was telling a story that everyone could understand and relate to. As soon as The Gambler was released, it dominated the charts. The song became a country anthem and earned Kenny Rogers a Grammy. More than that, it became his signature song. The song was so successful that The Gambler didn't just stay in the music world. It spawned a series of TV movies starring Kenny Rogers himself. He played the character The Gambler, an experienced gambler who lived great adventures in the Wild West. The first film was released in 1980 and was so successful that it spawned several sequels over the years. The connection between Kenny Rogers and The Gambler was so strong that, even decades later, the audience still requested this song at his shows. He could never stop singing it because people wanted to hear this story every time. It was this song that cemented Kenny Rogers as a legend. From that moment on, he was not just a country singer. He was an icon, a reference for generations of artists and fans. And the best was yet to come. If Kenny Rogers was already a solo phenomenon, when he joined forces with other great artists, magic happened. And of all the partnerships he had throughout his career, one of the most unforgettable was with Dolly Parton. In 1983, Kenny and Dolly released Islands in the Stream, a song written by the Bee Gees that ended up becoming one of the most iconic duets in music history. The chemistry between them was simply perfect. The way their voices blended, the way they exchanged glances on stage, the ease with which they sang. Everything seemed natural. Islands in the Stream, that is what we are. The song was a huge success. It reached the top of the charts not only in country but also in pop, and became one of the best-known songs by both artists. To this day, when people think of classic duets, this is one of the first songs that comes to mind. But what made this partnership so special? Kenny and Dolly had a true friendship. They respected each other and had fun together, which was evident in all their performances. The audience felt this connection and loved seeing the two on stage. They became inseparable in the memories of their fans. In addition to Dolly Parton, Kenny also shone in other unforgettable duets. One of them was with Sheena Easton on the song We've Got Tonight. This romantic song touched the hearts of listeners and proved that Kenny could do much more than just tell stories about cowboys and gamblers. Another remarkable moment was his collaboration with Lionel Richie on the song Lady. The song, written by Lionel himself, was a gift to Kenny and became another great success in his collection of hits. He also collaborated with artists such as Kim Carnes, Ronnie Milsap and Dottie West, always bringing emotion and authenticity to each duet. Kenny Rogers was not only an incredible solo singer. He knew how to share the stage and create unforgettable moments. And this skill only reinforced his status as one of the greatest artists of all time. But Kenny Rogers didn't stop there. In addition to singing, he also shone in film and television. If you think Kenny Rogers only shone in music, you're wrong. In addition to his striking voice and his sung stories, he also showed his talent as an actor in film and television. It all started with the huge success of The Gambler. Since the song told such a rich and engaging story, someone had a brilliant idea: to turn it into a TV movie. And who better to play the lead role than Kenny Rogers himself? That's how, in 1980, the public met Kenny Rogers as the character Brady Hawks, an experienced and charismatic gambler from the Wild West. The film was a huge success and was so successful that it spawned 4 sequels over the years, each one bringing new adventures of the gambler who knew how to read cards and people. But it didn't stop there. Kenny began to get more and more involved in acting, exploring different roles. He starred in other films and television series, including Coward of the County, based on another of his hit songs, and Six Pack, 1982, a film in which he played a former race car driver who ends up helping a group of troubled kids. Even without a traditional acting background, Kenny had something essential for success on screen: charisma and presence. He knew how to tell stories through songs, and this helped him stand out as an interpreter as well. He made the characters seem real, as if they were extensions of himself. In addition to films, he also participated in several TV programs and talk shows, always showing his fun and charismatic side. His friendly and relaxed manner made any interview with him a success. Kenny Rogers' talent was multifaceted. He was not limited to being just a singer. He was a complete entertainer. Whether in music, film, or television, he knew how to captivate his audience and tell stories that stuck in their minds. And did you know that Kenny Rogers was also successful in business? The business side: fast food and business success. If Kenny Rogers had already conquered the world of music and acting, why not try something new? And that's exactly what he did. In the 90s, he showed that, in addition to being an incredible artist, he also had a special talent for business. It all started when he decided to invest in the food business, creating his own restaurant chain called Kenny Rogers Roasters. But he didn't want to just put his name on any old business. He wanted something special, something that had quality and that truly represented his values. Kenny partnered with John Wyche Brown, one of the big names in the fast food industry and former owner of KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Together, they created a chain focused on home-style roasted chicken, with tasty sides such as corn, mashed potatoes, and cornbread. The idea was to offer a healthier alternative to traditional fast food, which was dominated by fried foods. The first restaurant opened in 1991, and the brand quickly began to grow. The combination of a famous name and delicious food made Kenny Rogers Roasters a success. In a short time, the chain spread throughout the United States and even abroad, reaching countries such as Malaysia and the Philippines. Of course, fans loved the idea of being able to eat at a restaurant named after their idol. But Kenny himself was also involved in the project. He made commercials, appeared at promotional events, and even joked about the restaurant in interviews. The peak of Kenny Rogers Roasters' popularity was in the 1990s, and it eventually had hundreds of branches open. In fact, the chain became so famous that it appeared in one of the most iconic episodes of the series Seinfeld. where one of the characters becomes addicted to the restaurant's chicken. However, over time, competition in the fast food market became fiercer, and the brand lost strength in the United States. Eventually, the restaurants closed and the company was sold. But to this day, Kenny Rogers Roasters still exists in a few Asian countries, where it continues to be a huge success. This phase of Kenny's life showed that he was not only a brilliant artist, he also knew how to turn a good business into something great. His name was not only synonymous with music but also with quality and innovation. But even with so many hits, the music world was changing. Could Kenny have adapted? If there's one thing that separates good artists from true legends, it's the ability to reinvent themselves. And Kenny Rogers did it like few others. In the 80s and 90s, the music world was changing. New artists were emerging, new styles were dominating the radio, and country was also undergoing a transformation. The classic style that Kenny helped popularize was giving way to a more modern sound, influenced by pop and rock. But instead of remaining stuck in the past, Kenny adapted. He knew he needed to connect with a new audience without losing his essence. This is how he began to explore a more contemporary sound, forming strategic partnerships and choosing songs that mixed traditional country with pop influences. It was during this period that some of his greatest hits emerged. In 1980, he released Lady, a romantic song written by Lionel Richie, which became a phenomenon. The song dominated the charts, not only in country, but also in pop and R&B. Kenny proved that his voice could touch hearts in any musical genre. In the following years, he continued to innovate. He worked with renowned producers, released albums with a more modern feel, and recorded duets that delighted the public. We've Got Tonight, with Sheena Easton, and Morning Desire were big hits of this period, showing that Kenny knew exactly how to stay relevant. Another remarkable moment was when he released They Don't Make Them Like They Used To, a song that was nominated for a Golden Globe and was part of the soundtrack of the film The Last Tough Guys, 1986. This showed that, in addition to his voice remaining powerful, his influence on pop culture went far beyond country music. In the 90s, when country music underwent yet another transformation, bringing in new names like Garth Brooks and Shania Twain, Kenny could have been left behind. But once again, he knew how to reinvent himself. He released new albums, toured internationally, and even participated in TV specials to maintain his connection with fans. The secret to Kenny Rogers' continued success was his ability to evolve without losing his identity. He never tried to force radical changes. He just knew how to choose the right path so that his music would continue to live on. And that's how he's gone through the decades, always remaining one of the biggest names in country music. But his career still had many surprises ahead. A life of recognition and awards. When an artist manages to go through decades of success, it's natural that he accumulates awards and honors. And with Kenny Rogers, it was no different. He not only won the hearts of his fans, but he was also widely recognized by the music industry for his talent and cultural impact. Throughout his career, Kenny Rogers won 3 Grammy Awards, the first in 1977 for Lucille for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. Soon after, in 1979, came another Grammy for the hit The Gambler, which consolidated his name among the greatest artists in country music. His third Grammy came in 1988 for Best Country Duet for Make No Mistake She's Mine, a collaboration with Ronnie Milsap. But the Grammys were just the beginning. Kenny Rogers also won 6 Country Music Association Awards, CMA Awards, and was honored with 18 American Music Awards, AMAs, an impressive feat for any artist. His albums have sold more than 120 million copies worldwide, making him one of the most successful artists in history. He has also had 24 #1 songs, something few have achieved in country or pop. But perhaps one of the greatest honors of his career was his induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2013. It was a definitive recognition that he was one of the greatest country artists of all time. That same year, he received an honorary Lifetime Achievement Award at the CMA Awards, a tribute to his illustrious career and the influence he had on music. In addition, in 2015, Kenny was honored by the Kennedy Center Honors, one of the most prestigious awards for artists who have profoundly impacted American culture. These awards and honors were just a reflection of what fans already knew. Kenny Rogers was not just a singer, he was a living legend. And more than the statuettes and trophies, the true prize of his career was the love of the public, who never stopped supporting his music over the years. But at this point his personal life also became a priority for Kenny. In the next chapter we will talk about his life off the stage, his relationships, children, and how he balanced fame with family. Did you know that he was married 5 times? Let's find out more about this side of the country star. Personal life and relationships. Behind the spotlight, the awards, and the crowd singing his hits, Kenny Rogers was also a man with an intense personal life, full of loves, challenges, and learnings. He married 5 times throughout his life and had 5 children, each leaving their mark on his career. His first marriage was in 1958 to Janice Gordon and lasted only 2 years. The relationship was brief, but it brought his first child, Carol Lynn, into the world. At the time, Kenny was still trying to find his place in the music world, and the pressures of his career ended up affecting the relationship. After the divorce, he married again in 1960, this time to Jean Rogers. This marriage was also short-lived, ending in 1963. Even though fame was still far from coming, Kenny already felt the impact that his dedication to music had on his personal life. In 1964 he married Margot Anderson for the 3rd time, which lasted until 1976. It was during this period that Kenny began to gain notoriety, especially with the first edition. The couple had a son, Kenneth Jr., but once again Kenny's busy schedule made family life difficult. Kenny's most notable marriage was in 1977 with Marianne Gordon, an actress known for her roles in film and television. This was his longest relationship, lasting 16 years. They had a son together, Christopher Cody Rogers, and seemed to have a solid relationship. But the life of a star took its toll, and the marriage ended in 1993. Even after the divorce, Kenny always spoke fondly and respectfully of Marianne. Finally, in 1997, Kenny found what he called the great love of his life, Wanda Miller. The couple had twin sons, Justin and Jordan, born in 2004 when Kenny was already in his 60s. With Wanda he had a stable and loving relationship until the end of his life. This time Kenny tried to better balance his career and family life. With his children younger, he began to slow down and began to value the moments with them even more. He knew that he had lost time with his older children due to his career, and he didn't want to repeat that mistake. In the last years of his life, Kenny Rogers dedicated himself more to his family, enjoying the moments away from the stage. He became a more present father and found peace with Wanda and the twins. Even with a love life full of twists and turns, Kenny was always a romantic. His songs spoke of love, loss, and reunions, something he knew well in real life. And perhaps it was this sincerity in his songs that made so many people identify with his music. Final years and farewell from the stage. After decades of enchanting the world with his voice and his stories, Kenny Rogers felt it was time to slow down. He had already achieved everything an artist could dream of: awards, fame, success, and most importantly, the love of the public. But life in the spotlight takes its toll, and as the years went by, he realized that he wanted something he never had in abundance: time for his family. In 2015, Kenny officially announced that he was retiring. He decided to do a farewell tour called The Gambler's Last Deal, to say goodbye to his fans in a special way. The announcement took many people by surprise. After all, his voice was still strong and his name was still relevant. But Kenny felt that the time had come to step down from the stage. The tour was emotional. At each show he made a point of thanking his fans for all their affection over the years. He knew that without them his career would not have been what it was. Each performance was a celebration of his career, and fans would say goodbye to him with tears in their eyes. Kenny also explained that he wanted to dedicate the last years of his life to Wanda Miller and his twin sons, Justin and Jordan. His boys were still teenagers and he wanted to be there to see them grow up. This time it wasn't the stage that called him, it was home. But his final farewell to the stage came in an unforgettable way. In 2017, Kenny performed his last official show at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. And to make the night even more special, Dolly Parton took the stage for an emotional farewell. The two sang together, recalled moments from their careers, and shared a hug that made the audience cry. It was a symbolic scene, two country music legends who made history together, ending a cycle side by side. After this show, Kenny completely withdrew from public life. His health was no longer the same and he wanted to live his last years in peace. He spent most of his time at home, surrounded by his family, away from the hustle and bustle of the stage and tours. But even away from music, his legacy lived on. His songs were still played on the radio, covered by new artists, and continued to move fans of all ages. The Last Show and the Farewell to Dolly Parton. The year was 2017, and the world of country music was preparing for a historic moment. After more than 60 years of career, Kenny Rogers would take the stage for the last time. The farewell took place on October 25 at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, a venue that had already hosted music legends, but that night was reserved for one of the most beloved of all. The event, called All In for the Gambler, Kenny Rogers' farewell concert celebration, brought together an all-star cast who wanted to pay tribute to the man who had marked their lives and careers. Names such as Reba McEntire, Lionel Richie, Chris Stapleton, Alison Krauss, and Little Big Town were there. But there was one presence that made the night even more special: Dolly Parton. Dolly and Kenny were more than just musical partners. They were soul buddies. Together they had scored one of the biggest hits in country music history, Islands in the Stream, and since then they had been inseparable. When Kenny announced his retirement, Dolly made sure to be by his side for his last show. On that stage, the emotion was palpable. When the two began to sing Islands in the Stream, the audience knew they were witnessing something that would never happen again. Their voices still fit perfectly, and the affection between them was evident. But the most touching moment came when Dolly looked at Kenny and, with tears in her eyes, said, "I will always love you." The audience gave a standing ovation, and Kenny, moved, replied, "And I will always love you too." It was a goodbye that felt like a reunion. A moment of mutual gratitude, a perfect ending to a partnership that spanned generations. Shortly thereafter, Kenny retired from the stage for good. His health no longer allowed him to lead the busy life he once did, and he wanted to spend his final years with his family, especially his twin sons. Dolly Parton continued her brilliant career, but always spoke of Kenny with affection and longing. Their friendship was true, and that last concert together was a gift to their fans, a moment that would forever remain in the memory of country music. The passing of a legend. On March 20, 2020, the world lost one of the most iconic voices in country music. Kenny Rogers passed away peacefully at the age of 81, surrounded by the love of his family and under medical care, at his home in Georgia. The cause of death was attributed to natural causes, marking the end of a brilliant career that spanned more than 6 decades. The news of his death was released by his family in an emotional statement. The Rogers family is sad to announce that Kenny Rogers passed away peacefully at his home of natural causes, in the care of his loved ones. They thank the public for their outpouring of love and support over the years and ask for privacy during this difficult time. The news shook the music world. Artists from all generations paid their respects, remembering not only Kenny's unparalleled talent, but also his generosity, charisma, and unique ability to tell stories through music. Dolly Parton, his lifelong friend and duet partner, paid emotional tribute on social media. In a video holding back tears, she said, "I loved Kenny so much. My heart is broken. And a big piece of my life went with him today." Lionel Richie, one of his great friends and collaborators, also expressed his grief. "I have lost one of my musical heroes and a great friend. His voice and his songs will live on forever." Even though Kenny Rogers has been away from the public eye in recent years, his impact on music has never faded. His songs continue to be played on the radio, covered by new artists, and moving generations who grew up listening to his unique voice. His farewell was low-key, just as he wanted. The family opted for a private ceremony due to the COVID-19 pandemic, respecting Kenny's wishes not to have a large funeral. But regardless of the size of the ceremony, the tribute he received from around the world proved that his legacy will never be forgotten. Even after his death, Kenny Rogers lives on in the melodies of The Gambler, Islands in the Stream, Lady, and so many other hits that marked his career. He may be gone, but his music still touches hearts, and his stories are still told through generations. Now let's talk about Kenny Rogers' legacy and how his music continues to influence artists to this day. Because legends never die, they just keep playing in other hearts. Legacy and influence on music. Even after his passing, Kenny Rogers remains eternal in the history of music. His legacy is not limited to awards, million-dollar record sales, or sold-out tours. What truly made him immortal was his ability to move people, tell stories through music, and connect with people of different generations. His impact on country music was enormous. He helped popularize the genre worldwide, taking his songs beyond the United States and winning fans in several countries. His style mixed traditional country with pop and folk influences, making his songs accessible to an even wider audience. Many artists of the new generation cite Kenny as an inspiration. Big names in modern country such as Blake Shelton, Keith Urban, Chris Stapleton and Garth Brooks have already mentioned the importance of Kenny Rogers in their careers. His way of interpreting songs and his ability to convey emotions through his voice became a reference for everyone who came after him. But his impact wasn't limited to country music. He was one of the few artists who managed to navigate different musical genres, collaborating with pop, soul, and even rock stars. His partnerships with Lionel Richie, Sheena Easton, Dolly Parton, and others showed that his talent transcended any label. In addition, his work in film and television helped to further consolidate his name. His films based on The Gambler were a ratings success and helped create an even stronger bond between Kenny and his fans. Even years after his death, his music lives on. Songs like The Gambler, Lucille, Lady and Islands in the Stream are still re-recorded, played on the radio and moving new listeners. His unique voice continues to echo around as if he had never left. But perhaps Kenny Rogers' greatest legacy is the example he left as an artist and a human being. He was never just a star. He was a storyteller, a man who knew how to balance success with humility, and someone who always valued the people around him. And as he himself said in The Gambler, "The secret to survival is knowing what to hold on to and what to let go." Kenny Rogers held on to what mattered most: his music, his talent, and his love for his fans. And that's why he will never be forgotten. His story lives on, his voice will never fade. He may be gone, but his music will live on forever. And now I ask you, what is your favorite Kenny Rogers song? Leave your comment and share this story so that more people can learn about the incredible journey of this country music legend.